Hey, my name is Richard Canfield. I'm an authorized infinite banking practitioner, author, and podcast host. And catch me on the Jesse T Show.
Richard, welcome to the Jesse T Show, brother.
Hey, happy to be here, man. I'm excited about having a fun chat with you today and seeing where it goes.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to have you, man. There's a lot of interesting conversation topics we've kind of hit on, and I'm really excited to hear more about the book that you just put out. I'm excited to hear about your journey and how you got there, and some of the different life lessons that you've picked up along the way that you're helping other people along the path. So, just give us a quick little context on who you are and what you do, please.
Yeah. So I'm an authorized infinite banking practitioner with the Nelson Nash Institute. That's an organization based in the United States. I'm in Canada, but there's a number of my colleagues all over North America, and we've gone through an authorization program to learn how to teach the concept of infinite banking, which was developed by my late mentor, R. Nelson Nash. Nelson, he was a dear friend of mine. I loved him dearly. He legitimately changed my entire life from start to finish. There's not a single component of my life that hasn't been positively impacted by meeting him, getting to know him, and how he's inspired me to grow as a human being. And so what my team and I do is, in our podcast and our book, they're really reflections of what we've taken in and learned from Nelson. And Nelson was, very well-read individual. He was an Austrian economist. He was a forester. He was a real estate investor, very successful in a lot of these areas, and he ended up getting into the life insurance business. And back in the early '80s, people may remember that there was this massive interest rate spike, and there was a lot of economic problems happening. And during that time, it put a massive amount of pressure on Nelson. He was really, under the gun, and he had a real estate development deal because all the gurus and experts at that time, just like they do now, were saying, "Hey, that real estate's magical. All you need to do is apply some leverage, use OPM, someone else's money, and everything will be fine. And you'll make out like a bandit." And Nelson was successful at that until the lever went the other direction. And so he found himself owing $500,000 on an open line of credit at 23.5% interest in 1981.
Wow.
Now, $500,000 in 1981 is very different than $500,000 today in 2022. There's a massive differential in those two things. Then there was a business partner. So he had a partnership. They were doing a development project. And one of the partners was one of the biggest, named partners in the largest law firm in Birmingham, Alabama, and he bankrupted on them. So Nelson had to eat. His share of the deal that he had to eat was another 300 grand. So just imagine for a moment, put yourself in an interest rate crazy environment, unheard of, never seen before, really, in our North American environment, where you've got $800,000 owed at 23.5% interest, and tell me how you feel.
Yeah. Like you can't breathe at that point. There's people that, have much less debt that are having cash flow problems where they don't have enough money to eat the way they want or travel, do the things they want to do because they're immersed in debt. And this number to many of those people will be absolutely staggering.
Yeah, even today.
Yeah.
And now take that back 40 some odd years ago, and it gets amplified because the value of our dollar and what people were earning at that stage. I mean, the median income was probably like maybe 20 grand or something around that time. Like that, you were making good money if you're making 20 grand a year at that point in time.
Wild.
And so, everything is proportional, right? So today, I mean, the equivalency of that is probably like maybe $2 million ballpark.
I was thinking probably a little more than double. Yeah.
I mean, it's bonkers, right? So, then there was a combination of other factors. He had a granddaughter that was born that had cancer. They didn't think she was going to survive. His brother died of a heart attack unexpectedly, which is how it happens for most people. Their house was robbed because there was a thing where silver was going up and people were robbing houses to steal like the knives and the forks and the silverware and everything.
Wow.
So all these things happened in a span of about 8 months. And so he was just like in this crazy pressure cooker when the life is like taking a baseball bat to your nuts pretty much like repeatedly all around the way. So It was through prayer and through a lot of things. Nelson realized he had the solution to his problem. It was that he had a whole bunch of really well-designed, but just at that point inefficient, high cash value insurance contracts, whole life insurance contracts. And he realized he could get access to money from 3 different insurance companies at various different interest rates to use to pay off what he called the snakes and dragons. So that's the bankers in his life.
Yep.
And the problem was the reason he couldn't do the whole thing is because he hadn't been putting enough capital in there. So he realized he needed to radically change the way he thought about money flowing through his life, reprioritize how he could build his own system to use the capital from the insurance company, but in a way where his money was optimized. And then over time, he could get rid of the snakes and dragons. It took Nelson 13 years to fire his bankers. And after that point in time, him and his wife, Mary, never saw a traditional bank, as you and I are familiar with, and your listeners will be familiar with, for about roughly 30 years. So he created an environment where his family line, if they choose to, and they follow his teachings and his principles, they will never need to participate in the traditional commercial banking sector for their needs of financing for any reason. All their car purchases are financed through the family system, houses, mortgages, investments, and so on and so on. Education. And so when Nelson passed away, it was about 3 years ago. Very sad day for me. We have a whole actually commemoration event that we did called Day of Nelson. If anyone wants to learn about Nelson, you go to dayofnelson.com, and we have literally interviews with people that were just tremendously impacted by this human being. There's people that come into your life and they touch you and they impact you in such a powerful way. It's unshakable. And so when you hear these stories, that's the kind of guy that Nelson was. And he was very humble as an individual. He said it was all about the message, not about the man. And when he passed away, Nelson, there were 17 tax-free death benefit checks paid out. And there was 28 additional insurance contracts that are still in force that he started and created throughout his lifetime that are handed down to the next generation. And so actually, when Nelson passed, they were getting new policies in his method cranked up. Even when he died at 88 years, he would say 88 revolutions around the sun. And he was working, I think, on his 5th great grandchild.
Wow.
So he had policies on 5 business partners, and there's still 3 of those policies that are alive, that are working today, and they're creating uninterrupted cash accumulation. They will pay a tax-free death benefit. There's access to capital and equity that the family can use for any of their needs. It's a self-fulfilling system that has created such a level of empowerment. And so folks like myself that are authorized to teach this process, we take Nelson's idea, his concept, his message out to the marketplace, and we help people understand how they can have a much higher degree of control and autonomy over their financial life and circumstances without having to, focus on chasing the next best, greatest shiny gem that's out there, whatever it is, whether it's the cryptocurrencies, the next hot stock tip, this next, guru saying that real estate's the best thing since sliced bread. We don't want to stop anyone from doing those things. But before you do those things, you want to get your foundation set, and you want that foundation to be efficient. So you have constant growth and accumulation on your money that is uninterrupted. That's one of the powerful things we can do in this system. And then you don't sacrifice liquidity. One of the problems that we find, I think you and I talked about this before, Jesse, is that people are always making a choice between this or that, this or that, this or that. I can go buy a car that I need to get to work and drive my family to soccer and hockey practice and basketball, or I can go and put the money over here into some investment in our case in Canada, RSP, or for the States in a 401k. I can choose to take 30 grand over here or 30 grand over here, but I can't choose to do both. Whereas when you incorporate the thinking that Nelson has taught us in his methodology and his book, Becoming Your Own Banker, you can understand that there's a way that you can do both. You can become your own banker, because technically you already are, you just didn't realize it. And you can still access capital to go and do the other thing, invest in the next opportunity, or buy that car. The thing is, when you go buy the car, you also have to make a repayment, because even if you pay cash for a car, well, if you want to go buy the next car, don't you need to have some cash? It means you need to build up the cash again. You have to save the money. That's a car payment. People just don't think about it that way. And they're very unintentional. What happens for some people, they're able to pay cash for that car, but then when it comes time to buy the next one, 5-6 years later, they don't have the money because they weren't intentional about resaving the capital. So that's where you now start to backslide. You should be going forward, but instead you're going backwards. And these things happen throughout people's life, and they're happening all the time, but it's like we don't see it happening because we're busy with life. We're always hustling and trying to do the next thing, and we're trying to work on ourselves. We're working on our family. We're working on the work, and we're doing all this stuff, but someone else is getting all the money. And our focus is to help you control and harness that with Nelson's message, so that your thinking is the key to helping you discover how much capital is flowing through your hands throughout a lifespan, and how much of it can you harness as it relates to your needs for utilization of that cash, buying the things that you need to make your life run and operate, which includes the investment world that you need to also grow money. So we're trying to, there's nothing really dramatically revolutionary about Nelson's thinking. I don't think, I shouldn't say that. I do think that, but it's really actually very simple. And what people need to realize is that ultimately you're involved in the banking industry. Money gets direct deposited into your account, and then you write checks from that, digitally, to pay for the things of life. And so ultimately, if you owned your own bank or banking system, wouldn't you want all your money deposited into your own system before you start writing checks out of it? And that's part of where we start to, create the shift in how people think about the flow of money through their life. And, I'm just so blessed to have been able to meet Nelson, and his book came into my life from a good friend of mine, who's now my business partner, my co-host, and the co-author of our new book in 2009. And it just changed everything for me, because I knew I always wanted to be the lender or the bank. When I first got my very first mortgage on a rental property, I was 18 years old. I'd had one before that with the family, but I didn't understand the mortgage. I didn't get to see all the paperwork. But when I bought my first rental property at 18, I remember looking at the mortgage documents. And I remember, like, I bought this property with my parents, and we were like high-fiving because interest rates had just dropped. And the very first interest rate I got on my very first rental property mortgage was 6.97%. And we thought we like stole the money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I started to dig into the mortgage paperwork, and I went and did an amortization chart, where there wasn't online tools to do that at that time. Really, I went and actually bought this black book, which is an amortization book, and you flip through and you have to line up all the numbers. You know the one I'm talking about?
Yep.
And I got fascinated by how amortization works, and how much money, especially front loaded on interest, that basically what we would refer to as interest volume, that lenders can make because of the power of time and all these sorts of things. And I'm like, wow, like, obviously, wouldn't this be what you want to do? Why wouldn't you just want to do this? But it was never clear how to do it. Later on, I learned about how you could do private lending on first, second, and third mortgages and stuff, but that's just one method. Ultimately, Nelson's method, in my opinion, is the real solution. It was what I had been looking for my whole life, and I just didn't even know it. So it hit me like a ton of bricks, and just literally everything's changed since that time.
Real quick, going back to Nelson's story, because this is going to be important for people to understand the power of this strategy. And this, there's so many strategies out there. It's just a matter of, you said a lot of times, habits and behaviors, and getting your foundation set before you take off to the races. And, having a diverse portfolio is important, and having different tools that can get you there are even more important. So thinking about his debt accumulation in such a short amount of time, $800,000. If you were to fast forward that over 40 years, it's closer to $2 million at a 23% interest rate. That seems like game over. That seems like you're declaring bankruptcy. You're passing on debt to your loved ones. You're becoming a burden. Like, your life sucks. No quality of life. How old was he when he incurred that debt? And from what I heard you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, did it take him 13 years to pay out of that debt when you said he fired the banks? Like, tell me a little bit about that part of the story.
Yeah. So he was around 51, 52 ballpark in that zone.
So in a season of life where you don't have time on your side, so to speak, of being able to, like, when you're younger, you could be, and this is the idea of investments in general, to a degree, you could be more risky when you're younger, because you quote unquote have more time to make up any bad investments and learn and make more money. And your income earning years are still ahead of you. Where at 50, you're at that point where if you lose a job, it might be hard to get another job, because you might get aged out, which is terrible in our society, but it's what we're facing. And at that point, you really have to be good at what you're doing, or go start your own thing. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is Nelson was really good at what he did. And so at that point in time, he was in the life business. He was no longer in forestry, but he took the concepts that he learned as an educated forester, which is about thinking long range. You want to plan for a forest that's going to be profitable. Well, it takes 40 years to really turn that into a proper machine.
Yep.
About every 10 years, you can cull a section, but then you replant. but really to get something that will thrive with longevity, where every season you can cut and receive profits from what you're doing, and it replenishes automatically. You're looking at about a 40-year window. So Nelson, he had one unique aspect about his thinking, which was he learned to think beyond his own lifespan. He understood long range. He says you got to learn how to think at least 70 years down the road. If you're not thinking about generation 2 and 3, why are you even here?
Yep.
He really believed in that. And so, and it's evident in how he lived, and then also how he passed. So, being at a seasoned age, as you said, he had skills, he had knowledge, and he was good at what he did. When he really discovered this, he kind of had the mechanics and the basics around it with his forestry background, and as well as being, his knowledge of Austrian economics and those foundational components. Then his insurance background put it together. He realized, they really misclassified things. He said when he was in forestry school, they had no less than 2 courses every semester on the classification of things. And he says, if you learn how to classify things properly, everything else becomes much easier, and you classify them by their major characteristics. What he understood about, once he really understood about whole life insurance, was that it was grossly misclassified. It should have been called a personal monetary system with a death benefit thrown on the side for good measure. But now it's a long name. You need some kind of a fancy acronym.
And it's not sexy, right? Like, and once you start talking about, what's affectionately sometimes known in our circles as death insurance, people get kind of turned off,
They do. Yeah, exactly. And because they've had an experience or whatever it is. And that's marketing conditioning over time. And that's because the banking industry and the financial industry has been focusing people on products, products that are all about returns and chasing return. Meanwhile, you've got this thing that's been here for 250 years that's been knocking out of the park the whole time, and no one's lost any money. It just keeps growing, and it grows on autopilot. But more importantly, it really has more similarities and function to like a bank account, where you can have, but you have, it's like equity in a house. People go and get their home equity line of credit. Well, the problem is the house value can go up and it can go down. All right. And a lot of people have experienced, some are experiencing that right now.
Yes.
And in 2008, that was a big problem. And then the line of credits were being frozen by traditional banks, where you couldn't access it anymore. Well, imagine that you had this house, and the house grew in value each and every year, and you couldn't stop it. It wasn't based on the marketplace. Okay. You had contractual access to tap into the equity of the increase of that house all day long, no questions asked, one piece of paper, and the bank direct deposits the money into your bank account within about 2 to 7 business days. And then you could go put that money to work. You still have the house, and it's going to be bigger next year because the market isn't what's involved. It's based on a contract.
Yep.
And you're always working with an increased value of capital. That's effectively what a well-designed cash value whole life contract is, when it's built under Nelson's ideas and his mindset. And so it's very similar to long-term buy and hold real estate, but the difference being you're doing business now with a life company that you co-own. You participate in the profits every year, whereas most people don't own a bank.
Yep.
But you can easily own, through free contract, no one forces you to do it, an insurance contract where you participate in the profits. So now you co-own the lender, right? And you share in the profitability of everyone that's working with that pool. And it's a very liberating and freeing way of doing things. And one of the things you and I talked about before, Jesse, when we spoke, was about this thing, which I think is effectively an evil in the world, which is a fractional reserve banking system. And some of your listeners may or may not be familiar, I don't know, but effectively it's the Federal Reserve, and for us in Canada, it's the Bank of Canada. They have the ability to ultimately manipulate the money supply, and the way
do
that
it on
they
purpose, especially in these environments where we have inflation or stagflation or even recession, depression. The money supply is either turned on or turned on and up, or off and out, so that it can adjust and cool off the market or heat up the market. So this is actually how economic cycles work for people that are listening. Is these things that we see from inflation, recession, great, normal 10-year bull run, which we're way overdue for a correction there, and we're kind of starting to feel different effects of it. These are things that is absolutely controlled by these agencies, and they turn on the money supply and turn off the money supply.
And in combination with that, they manipulate the interest rates. And
yes.
so the artificial suppression of interest rates to a dirt low level for, 10 to 15 years has a buildup of a problem that gets created.
Yep.
And so house prices rise because it's easy to buy it because the payments are lower. So that's what helps push the housing market up. There's other factors, but that's one of the leading factors. In Canada right now, that's a huge, huge problem. And they're just saying that, real estate markets in general broad terms are going to be dropping at least 25% over the next year in Canada. Well, there's a couple major areas where that's really going to be impacted.
Sure.
But it's a misleading because it's a headline. What's misleading is that they're saying the market is dropping, but that's not accurate. The market never should have been there in the first place.
Yep.
It's not dropping, it's normalizing. It's just coming back to a reality where it belongs. And so but this all happens because of people making decisions based on a mindset of Keynesian economics theory. And so Nelson said, if you understood the business cycle, the Austrian mindset on the business cycle and how this manipulation works, you'll realize that, what actually leads to the cause of inflation. So it's expansion of the money supply and then easy access to credit. And the inflation that we're dealing with right now, which is a huge problem, ultimately we can blame the cause on these people and these institutions. However, the real cause is actually us as a society,
people seeking the money. Yeah.
We reach out to go get the money. So every time you go to get the loan for the car or the vacation or whatever it is, when you demand the money and you're making the request and loan request and they grant it to you, that's when the money is actually created. Yep. So we're the ones that are actually the problem. And if our demand for their funny money continues to rise, we amplify the problem.
And that's what it is. The money is at this point completely not real. It's just paper.
Just paper. 1971, Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. And he said on national television, we're all Keynesians now. And that is really where the erosion of the US dollar started to begin. I mean, it started before that, but it really amplified after that period of time.
And selling part of that to China too, with like owning half of our dollar.
All of it. And right now in China, there's a massive real estate epic meltdown that's happening. I just did a reaction video to some of the news that's happening out there. And so there's a lot of economic turmoil. And economic turmoil is not new. And you know what? This isn't going to be the only time.
It's cyclical.
So you're alive and you're taking air into your lungs. Guess what? It's going to happen again. The extent or the impact to you might be different. But the number one thing that we can do is understand, where are you at a higher level of control of your circumstances? And if you can take over the banking function as it relates to your personal family's economic needs, you're doing that in a private free contract with other free people where the money supply cannot be manipulated, then you're automatically becoming part of the solution versus part of the problem. So Nelson's bigger, vision around that was really that, if we can get 10% of the population, embracing this idea, this concept, you get, like the book, The Tipping Point from Malcolm Gladwell, you reach that point of no return where an idea is at its time and it must make its way through the rest of the society. And so that's really kind of what the mission is of members of the Nelson Nash Institute, like myself, is to try to support how can we liberate the North American society, who has the ability to do this really effectively, from a system that I believe isn't designed to support you, by giving you the tools to be understand ownership, to understand control, to understand personal autonomy, to understand your day-to-day cash flow and optimization of that, and do it in such a way where you're in free contract with other free people without there's no requirement to go and rally and do all these protests and stuff to get the government to change something, rather than trying to get a top-down solution, which will likely never happen. I mean, the closest person to doing that was Ron Paul during the Ron Paul revolution, and trying to end the Fed or whatever. Instead, we can just simply do this bottom up. It's a bottom up solution to a top down problem. And the way that it works is at the you and me level. And when we understand that, not only can you be personally profitable and successful and happy, because every time that you reclaim a little piece of your financial life back from someone else, from some other institution, there's something that happens where your shoulders go back a little bit more. You stand tall, you feel better, your family's protected, you got tax-free benefit, you got access to capital, your capital is always growing, you're less worried about the market corrections. You're now getting involved in a community of people where you can communicate about these ideas And then suddenly, Nelson said this, and I found it's very true. And maybe you can tell me what your thoughts are. But when you have readily available access to capital, opportunities of high caliber will track you down. In
No
fact, they will
question.
hunt you down.
Yep. Yeah, money finds a way to leave one way or the other, whether you control that money leaving or the money is spent on something that you weren't really planning on. So it's one of those things you have to give it a job. And when you are operating in a different space of ease, of power, and in a good way of power, and you have these it's almost this energy and this attitude that attracts things to you. And when you do have, it's like when preparation, hard work, preparation, and opportunity meet, that can equal success, kind of thing. And that's the same thing when you're financially positioned, whether it's heavy cash flow, great investments, great assets. If you have like a very powerful, we'll call it, a whole holistic portfolio, these things will pop up, and you have opportunities and options. And this is where you start to be able to create wealth and legacy wealth. Like you were talking about, looking at the next generation, this whole journey on earth, and this kind of gets in like the spiritual realm, but this whole journey on earth is for us to remember who we are, to heal some of the shit we need to heal, but then also to take everything that we've learned and we've done and give it away freely to the next generation so they could have a better chance than we have.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're paying it forward. And that's what Nelson did to me. I'm just a vessel to help, in my opinion, translate and push forward what I learned, and to make sure that it's able to continue on. And I'm doing that with my children. I'm doing that with my clients. I'm doing it through our podcast, our book series. These are things that are, being able to have this conversation with you. If this message reaches even one person and they realize that they could take more control of their financial life, and they opt to, buy Nelson's book and learn about it, or go watch his documentary film. This is our Nelson Nash. It's available on YouTube. If you go to do these things and you discover that this is the path that I want to go down, then it was all worth it. And, even if someone decides it's not the path they want to go down, at least you're now exposed to a new idea.
Yep.
Nelson used to do this thing. And I remember the first time it happened, we were at one of our annual conferences. We have an infinite banking think tank that we do every year in February in Birmingham. And I think it might have been my second event I was there. And we have like a little social event, and there's usually a guest speaker, usually an economist or something. And I was grabbing a beverage, at the little bar. And Nelson, he would like to have like a Merlot after dinner, sort of a thing. So we're sitting there having a chat, and there was this empty table right there, just like a standard, like conference table, or not conference, but like like the whatever, your typical hotel table. And he put his glass down and he says, "Richard, imagine this bottom of the glass, the circumference of the glass represents everything that I know that's out there to know in the known world. This is the extent of my human knowledge." And he put it down on the edge of the table. And then he says, "Now imagine, look out at this table. This table represents all there is to know in the wide universe. It's all the information, all the knowledge that's out there. Look at how much I know in respect to what is available to know. And it's this infinitesimal amount." And then he would say, he went and grabbed a jug, like a water jug, and then he replaced the glass and he put the water jug down. "Now, Richard, if I go and increase the level of my knowledge, if I expand my context of knowledge, I know an awful lot more for sure. Still, it's a small amount relative to all there is to know. But take a look at the outer perimeter. Look at the outer circumference of the jug. Look at the extent to which the fringes of my knowledge reach that which is unknown to me. And so the more that you know, the more you know that you didn't know. And so this is the human capacity for us to learn and to grow. And it is truly a blessing. And it is something that is an astonishment. The fact that we have such an ability to take in, grow, and learn the amount of information that we do. And I just crossed 41. I have a particular goal of living to 165, which I learned from my coach, Dan Sullivan. It's a hairy, audacious goal. So I'm about 1/3 of the way, roughly through, less than 1/3 of the way through my lifespan. And I got a lot of run rate on what I want to learn yet. And so one of the number one things that you can do to take yourself out of the game of life is to lose the inspiration to learn.
Yep.
You might as well already be digging, don't be low hanging fruit for gravity. You might as well grab a shovel and start digging the grave, as far as I'm concerned. You got to be able to continue to learn, because that is what allows us to be a value to the other people that we communicate with in life, and to be inspired about new things. I know you're on a journey learning a lot about different areas of yourself and personal development so you can have the life that you want and desire. And I too am on that journey. Most of the people and entrepreneurs in general that I communicate with that have a bigger vision, that they're on a journey where they're trying to add value to people's life and also manifest the life that they want to have for themselves. Many are already at that point, but what makes it interesting is that high performing entrepreneurs, they might be at a point where they're very happy to have this amazing life, but they're still striving for more, for
Yep.
something else. And it's through the striving that, you have purpose and activity. And that's what, also lends to longevity. So these are things that I learned from Nelson. Nelson was working up until the very last day when he was in the hospital. And he was phoning people and he was talking to them and he was checking in with them and talking about the message and these kind of things. So, you know, uh, I really appreciate that. And I plan on living, at least to the best of my ability as Nelson demonstrated.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful way to live, right? And it's the journey. The journey is the prize, and learning along the way, and being a student at heart, remaining young at heart. These are all things that, there's these gurus that are out there. Some of them are amazing. Some of them are, you wonder, but like they all talk about, being happy, enjoying the present moment, and also, returning to what you were as a kid, which was this, curious, adventurous, maybe somewhat kind of like a rascal where you're having fun and being mischievous. But like these are where all these people get to. And I think that understanding that along the way leads to a life well lived, and even more than, just being a curious explorer, be a student at heart, which I can absolutely say is one of my traits. Going into the world of like healing and thinking about people that are great teachers or great influencers. Back in the day, if you were to go to a medicine man or a medicine woman and say, "Hey, I'm not feeling well," they would ask you 4 questions. When's the last time you stopped creating, singing, dancing, and playing? Right? And these little things that we can add to our life with zero cost, with almost no barrier to entry. These are things that we can control. And I would throw the fifth thing in there as being a lifelong student. Put all these together. I mean, you can literally change the way that you operate in the world and how you feel in the world. And once you do that, this goes back to being prepared for opportunities. If you can change your magnetism, if you can change your energy, things will come your way. And I want to segue back to just one more piece of some maybe connective tissue here. When I was a State Farm agent years ago, and there was a guy that would go around to all the different State Farm agencies. His name is John Henry Ball, and for some reason, his name is coming up. And I don't know if you know him from the world that you're in, but I forget the exact product, and it's probably very similar to what you're talking about. But he had like a 10-year life insurance product, and he called it the bank in the box. And a lot of what you're talking about, and he was really cool. He'd walk around like he's has this like this Yoda that he would bring, and like he put him at the front of the room, and like he would talk about like the force and like all this different stuff. So he was very animated, great speaker, great orator, but he would always talk about this bank in a box where you could pull from this life insurance product and be able to pay for things, replenish, put kids through college, all these things. Is this the same kind of idea of what you're talking about? I don't remember exactly what the product was, but it was a 10-year, I know that. And it was some sort of whole life variant with a cash value that you could kind of basically be your own bank.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think foundationally, it's the same, in the same vein, same general concept. I have heard the name before. I've never
Yeah.
heard the bank in the box, but I kind of like that.
Yeah.
And I certainly like the Yoda thing. I'm like, my brain, I'm already got inspired. I'm like, oh, I'd like to do that and just like mess around. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
These are not the droids you're looking for. But have, Nelson, because Nelson used to do that and tour around, and his very first policy that he actually used to talk about. He used to do a 10-hour seminar, and he
Wow.
delivered it all over North America. It was a Friday evening and an all-day Saturday. And his book, the book Becoming Your Own Banker, is the workbook. It's the workbook for his 10-hour seminar. And you can, if anyone's interested, you can actually go and watch a version of that somewhere. We just finished releasing it. Go to learnfromnelson.com, and you can go and watch Nelson's seminar. It's one that was never meant for release, but I spent a lot of time with a video editor, and we added like transcripts, and there's like clips of pages of the book and everything
Beautiful.
as he talks through it. But so he would go around and teach this concept. For his book was published in 2000, and so we're 22 years from it being published. So a lot of people say, well, why haven't I heard about this before? I'm like, well, the source material, in my opinion, was really only produced 20 years ago, and it sold over 500,000 copies worldwide as a self-published book, which is
Wow.
pretty much unheard of.
Yeah.
So people are getting the message, they are learning. But again, it's a big wide world out there. And so ultimately, what we do, and you mentioned kind of a 10 pay product, and so Nelson had several of those, and that's fine. However, what they realized is they landed a problem. The problem was in year 11 when they wanted to pay a premium, because premium is what creates capital.
Yep.
They couldn't do it.
Yep.
So they had to go get another one anyway.
Yes.
So that's how Nelson ended up with 49 policies at one time. And those were all cash creating assets. Now he didn't get them for death benefit. He got them as a place to store capital.
Nice.
That was efficient for the utilization in his life. And he actually tells a story about his State Farm policy. His brother sold it long before he was in the business. His brother sold it to him, and it was the annual premium was $388.20 a year, and he got this in 1959.
When you say $388.20, what is that? The amount?
Like $388.20 a year. It was
wow.
This is in 1959, and that was a lot of money. That was like,
especially to go for something like that. Yeah, exactly.
That was about 5% of his gross income, maybe 5-6% of his gross income at the time.
Yep.
And because he was in the National Guard at that point, and but that policy years later, one of the guys that he was in the National Guard with, he had this land, and he says, "Hey, Nelson, I know you're like a forester, you're in the land. Like, I have a need of capital. I'll sell you this land for a good price on payments." And so Nelson did the deal. He understood land, this timberland. And then about a year later, that same guy came back to him and he says, "Nelson, I underestimated my need of capital. If you just pay me out now, I'll discount it 25 cents on the dollar." So Nelson, he said, "Stand real still. I'll be right back." And he went to a State Farm office and he got a check. It was $3,000, and he went and paid this guy off the remaining balance. And when he sold that land years later, he sold it. So he had less than $38 an acre in the land. It was 500 acres of timberland, and he sold it for $500 an acre.
Wow.
And then he financed that to the new buyer for 15 years at 10% interest.
So now, it just compounded. Yeah.
Right. But none of that is shown in the illustration on the State Farm policy he had, because that was just the machine that allowed the deal to happen because he was well capitalized. So, people get their brains wrapped around their head and they focus on returns. What's the return on that? What's the return on access to capital, on control, without having to go and beg, borrow, and steal, and, fill out Mickey Mouse paperwork and have some snot-nosed kid working at the bank tell you that your loan is denied, dealing with changing lending, like all this claptrap that we have to deal with. Think about the value of power and control at your own personal economic level that is unmatched, and put a value on it. I suspect most people won't be able to.
Can you talk really quickly about high level overview, one of these main products that people are using to create their own, becoming your own banker? What life insurance vehicle is pretty common to do this, and some of the features and benefits, if you would.
Yeah. So at a high level, so we're talking about dividend paying participating whole life insurance with a mutual insurance company. Now in the United States, there's a lot of mutual companies available. There's some great quality companies, and they need to be optimized in a certain way where you have a solid enough foundation. When we talk about the foundation, it's the base policy, the core policy. And then we have what's called a paid up additions rider that's added on top, which is like a turbo booster for the policy, and it's flexible. So hypothetically, I'll just give you an example. Let's say someone wants to put in, I'll just use a number of 10 grand a year, and that's what you want to deposit into your system. Okay. When an advisor who's trained in this understands that, and they coach you through it, then they're going to help design that policy based on your circumstances and needs. So let's just say that hypothetically, 3,000 maybe is the minimum required premium, and then 7,000 is the flexible optional premium that's helping to turbo boost this thing. Okay. And it can get very efficient in a short period of time. And once you're at that stage, you always have the ability to pay the 3,000, the base, because, and later on in life, when you inject that $3,000 and it's giving you back $20,000, would you want to stop doing that? Right. Now you might lose the ability to do the 7,000 because you put too much in the contract that now you actually have, exempt rules, and maybe you're running into the situation where you might have a MECT contract, modified endowment contract. That could create a problem. So there's certain ways that policy needs to be designed to make sure that it can maintain for longevity and allow you to be able to inject capital. One of the things that Nelson says on one of the last pages of his book, it's a summary page, It's page 85, point number 2. He says, if you knew at passive income time, you would be getting back every single dollar you put into a system tax-free. Would you ever object to putting any more money into it?
Right.
I mean, it's a rhetorical question, but the obvious answer is no. And that's ultimately what you build with these. Even if it's built poorly, it still does that. It just takes longer to do it. And so in Canada, we operate the same way. We just have some various slightly different tax rules, and there's always slight variances. But from a principles, a conceptual viewpoint, it's the same. But the tool is just a tool. So I always say this: imagine, have you ever used a chainsaw before, Jesse?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And gas powered chainsaw, there's something about the smell of the fuel when it comes out there. It's kind of invigorating a little bit. Like I'm looking, you've got this like Spartan guy in the background. I'm picturing him like using this chainsaw right now. So I sharpen the chainsaw. I got the right fuel mix in. It's all ready to go. It's got the chain oil. I fire it up. I rip it a couple of times. Some dude walks by and I just say, "Hey, here you go, buddy." And I hand it over to him. He's never seen a chainsaw before. What could happen?
You get cut a limb off, hurt himself, somebody else.
Yeah, really hurt himself, hurt somebody else, and destroy the tool.
Yeah.
It wasn't the tool's fault. It was the user.
Sure.
So a financial product or tool is just that, it's a tool. And you need a toolbox, and you need different tools in your toolbox. So if you want a multi-tool that can do a whole bunch of things in your life, and you could just show up with that one thing and you could probably accomplish most stuff, that's what the properly designed whole life insurance product does. But that's the tool. And if you don't know how to use it, or you're working with a coach that doesn't know how to coach you on how to use it, the end result is you might harm yourself, or you're going to break the tool.
So,
right?
So let me run this back because, coming from the financial world, we have understandings in different capacities about different products and services, more than probably the person that hasn't heard about these things. And so when you're talking about whole life insurance, most people probably know what that is. But in terms of, there's term and there's whole life, there's different variants of each. There's all sorts of things. When you're talking about the specific tools or toolbox that incorporates a multi-tool or multiple tools, are you into that space using your illustration? And again, these are just these not exact numbers, but if someone were to take this policy, whole life insurance, pay $3,000 in annual premium per year, but up to $10,000 because they have an additional $7,000 they can put in. You alluded to a fact, again, arbitrary numbers, that you'd basically at some point could be building something that was more like $20,000 a year, whatever the number was. What does that mean for the layperson in terms of if they put in X, if they have a life event, they want to go on vacation, they want to, pull out some money for whatever, in a kind of high level overview way without getting into the super details, because you're not writing policy here, but like, what would you say to that person if they're excited to hear about this? They might get into this whole life policy. It's a cash value building policy. They put in $3,000 a year up to X amount. How does it work for them when it comes time to take out money and be able to kind of really start to enjoy the benefits of being their own banker?
Yeah, good question. So, first thing I would say is we have a ton of information about this and like really a path, a guide on how to learn about this process. We put it together. It's a very simple report. It's at 7steps.ca. That's 7steps.ca. It doesn't matter if you're American or not. You would still get value from the report because it literally points you through a learning journey to learn how this works in your life. And but it's, so I'll give you a real world example. So I have a new policy I created. I just got 2 new ones on my kids, and I got a new one on my wife. And the one on my wife is, again, I decided the premium because I'm the banker. I wanted to make the decision, and I wanted to inject $35,000 a year into this policy.
Okay.
So combined amongst all the policies I have, I'm at about 13 or 14 for my own family. My business partner, Jason, has about 68. He's got 4 kids, and each kid has like 4 policies, and he's got family members. He's got one on me as a business partner.
Yep.
He puts in over $500,000 a year into premium. I do about 150 grand a year in premium, including these new ones I did. Now, I didn't start there. My very first program was $4,200 a year.
Yep.
The next one was $200 a month. The next one was $200 a month. The next one was $6,000 a year. So like I accumulated over time as my brain and my imagination could see how I was able to do it.
Yes.
How I was able to fund more. And then also my income going up as well. These are factors that help with that. Now, the policy I just got on my wife, the reason I got this policy, many reasons, but one of them was it's really a tax policy for me.
Sure.
So, and I also needed to get more insurance on my wife. That was a requirement. So I put $35,000 a year. The minimum premium on that policy just to maintain it is about $9,500. So the
So,
rest of it,
for people that are listening to this, when you say it's a $35,000 annual, up to $35,000 annual premium, but the minimum is 9,000 and change, you know,
correct.
you're what is it, $700, $800 a month, whatever that number is, $800 a month.
Yep.
That's the minimum that you're paying in cash in this premium, but you do have the upside to, you know, 3 times that a month to make that $35,000 premium. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
And I built it that way intentionally.
Okay.
And there has to be a sufficient amount of that minimum there to make sure there's sustainability. You want to, you wouldn't build a house on a weak foundation. It'll
Yep.
crumble down around you. Unfortunately, there are some advisors who are building plans like that, and
Sure.
they don't realize that they're going to create epic tax problems for people down the road. So it needs to have a solid foundation underneath it. Now, in that example, I have to go pay the Canadian government, the CRA or the IRS equivalent, right? And would you believe it? They have no sense of humor at all. They want money from me every single year, like clockwork.
It's the worst.
So I got to pay them anyway. I got to set money aside to pay the tax bill. Well, rather than paying it to them directly, I'm injecting that capital, or a little bit more than I need to pay them, into a policy or a combination of policies. And immediately after I got this $35,000 policy, I put 35 in. It's paid up for the year now. I have a massive amount of death benefit. I instantly created another $100,000 a whole life death benefit on my wife in one shot because of it, a paid up addition. It created a huge pile of cash. I was able to take a policy loan from the life company. I'm a co-owner of the life company. Okay. I didn't pull my money out. I access money from their general pool, which is shared with all members, and they have to generate revenue off of that for the benefit of everyone in the game, which includes me. So I accessed a policy loan with no questions asked. I received the loan probably within 50, I took a while to send the paperwork in. But it took 15 days from the policy going live for me to get about 23 grand back.
Okay. And you had put in 35,000. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So you put in 35,000, you get this huge death benefit for your wife. You get access to this pool of funds that you share in as a co-owner in the life insurance company. So you put in 35, you immediately take back out 23, but you still have all these benefits plus, tax benefits as well. The idea with this 23,000 is just a matter of whatever you want to do with it. You could reinvest it back into another policy, or you could go and spend it, but you still have the other benefits of the things that you just created, is what you're saying.
I got all the other benefits, and 35,000 of my money, the real money, is working all the time for the rest of my wife's natural life. It will never sleep. It will never get COVID. It'll never go on vacation. It'll always be operating, and it grows tax exempt, and it's going to create thousands of amazing things for us in our future. I was able to liberate a great large portion of the money, and I used that to go pay the Canadian government some of my tax bill. Nice. My corporation. Cool.
Now, real quick, just because again, I'm trying to help the people listening to this so they can wrap their heads around it. So if you were to then take this policy loan, not from the 35,000 that you put in, but from the pool of money that belongs to you and the other, people that own in the insurance company, so to speak, what is the payback requirement there? And I guess if you don't pay it back, does it come off the value of the policy anyway? How does that work?
Awesome question. So exactly. Technically, I do not have to pay it back. Now, that would not be thinking like an honest banker.
Sure.
Okay. So I will be doing that, and we coach people on why and how that's important.
Yep.
But from a technical standpoint, I don't have to pay it back. It will come off of the death benefit when somebody dies. So it will get paid back no matter what, because the pool needs that money back for the benefit of everyone in the pool.
So they can invest the funds and all these different things. Yeah.
It includes my clients, my own children, right? So if we never pay that money back, it has to get paid back to the pool with interest for the benefit of everyone that's in that pool. Okay. That's what free people and free contract with one another. That's how they can receive value. And when that pool is profitable, which by the way, most of the companies, every company I work with, and most of the ones that my colleagues work with in the States, they've been profitable and paying surplus, divisible surplus to the par owners every single year, for as much as 200 years.
Hundreds of
in
years.
The United States.
These insurance companies don't really lose. That's why they've been around for so long. Yeah.
Yeah, because they use actuarial science. It's engineered. Okay. It's just like when you drive over a bridge, you expect that they over-engineered that bridge. Right. Well, that's what they do with insurance too. But they do it for their owners. And the only way you can own one of these things is to be a participating owner. Okay. So you're not sharing in a mutual company. It's not publicly traded on the stock exchange. You're not sharing with other owners or other masters. It's just the whole life owners. So it's like VIP, top of the food chain of the insurance world. You're the great white shark of the insurance realm. And that's really what it's all about. And so this 23,000 I borrowed, I get to choose the repayment schedule. They don't send out a bill. They don't automatically debit my account. I have to decide how to pay it back. Well, next year I'm going to have to pay another tax bill, don't I?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm already having to set the money aside, or else I'm going to be in a big problem, right? Well, can I just set that money against the policy loan?
Sure.
And then the policy loan's gone in a year, and then I can borrow that money again. Plus, I have an increased value in the new value of the policy, and I can borrow and I can pay my tax bill again, and I can cycle the money. So the same money I was going to give up, they require it. I'm going to give it to the tax man, Uncle Sam for you guys. Uncle Trudeau for us.
Oh,
goodness. I'm gonna give them the money no matter what. I was able to multitask that same money and create value in perpetual motion for my family. I have tax-free death benefit on my wife. I have constant accumulation on the money. I'm building equity. I get to control and use the equity. I control the repayment schedule. I didn't have to ask permission. I didn't have to ask anybody on how I do it. I get to decide when I make the repayments. If I want to do them lump sums once a month, once a week, I control all of it. No one gets to tell me anything. Yep. I'm in the power position, and I'm controlling the banking function as it relates to my needs with respect to my tax bill.
So I guess one of the big things, and kind of thinking about this as an overview, you hear a lot of people, it's an awareness thing. A lot of people just don't know what they don't know. We talked about this earlier in the conversation about learning. So there's that piece of it. People don't know that some people don't know this exists. Some people have a bad taste in their mouth for whatever reason, whether they've screwed something up themselves or someone screwed them over. Especially in the insurance world, there's a lot of potential issues there. So where do you feel like most people land on this when it comes to, why aren't more people doing it? And what is usually the aha moment for them when they're like, oh, okay, this is actually a really good opportunity for me and my family?
Yeah, I mean, I think why aren't more people doing it is it's really around awareness. And whole life insurance in general, and I don't mean I mean the core of what I do, but not the optimized, like we got a lot of bells and whistles we could do today that didn't exist 50 years ago.
Sure.
Right? But if you go back to the turn of the early 1900s, before that, you go up to the Great Depression, all the way up until like after World War II, whole life insurance was one of the primary savings vehicles of the North American population.
Yep.
It was a staple in the household. You were protecting the family, and you would build in cash values, and you could use them. So during the Great Depression, people were able to make their life operate because they had access to cash value. J.C. Penney was able to increase and grow and pay his staff so he could keep his doors open and not have to close down, and then became a massive conglomerate after because he outlasted his competition.
Yep.
Ray Kroc, he was able to start McDonald's because he could access a policy loan. There's the lady who did what is it? It's a pampered chef. She started that in her basement with a policy loan from a whole life policy, and then it was bought out by Berkshire Hathaway. So there's thousands of stories of these kinds of things. Jim Patterson in Canada, he owns like all the billboards in the country.
Wow.
Patterson Media Group. He used to tap into these things for opportunities all the time. So there's thousands of stories of successful people doing this, and success leaves clues. The problem is the media and the banking system that we know today. It all shifted, as into the 60s and 70s because they were trying to shift the way that people did their financial life onto, it was moving away from corporations and the pension system onto, okay, oh, you as the individual, you do it. Here's some products here. Oh, you got to invest your own money now. And then suddenly you could get access to the stock market. And then suddenly there's new product. And then there's index funds, and there's all this stuff that was created really in my lifespan and your and I lifespan, but in the span of overall time, It's an infinitesimal amount. So these things are all still relatively new, but that is not how people did things traditionally. So whole life insurance, and well-designed whole life insurance, is really the foundation. It should be the foundation of, I believe, of everyone's financial life. Every single thing that you want to do financially must be accomplished with capital.
Yes.
It's got to come from a reservoir. It's either your reservoir or someone else's reservoir. Well, if you're going to tap into a big pile of money, do you want to access your pile of money or the bank's pile of money? If you go and access a bank's pile of money because they've built it up and they have a lot, they're not going to let you access it for free.
Right.
You have to pay the piper and you got to
Yep.
jump through the hoops. That's because they're well capitalized and you are not. But if you're well capitalized and you do that with mutual insurance, with free contract with other free people, which no one can force you to do, it's a voluntary decision. You decide the premium, you decide all the components that go in when you build this with a trained coach. And now you're in a position where you're building up your reservoir of capital. When you want to access money, you access it under your terms, but you're accessing the insurance company's money. Your money never leaves. It continues to grow uninterrupted. So every dollar that goes in becomes an uninterrupted machine that never sleeps. It's working for you for the rest of time. And the worst case scenario is that somebody dies. And guess what? That's going to happen anyway.
Yep.
And so if you know, there's two fundamental things that we know in life: death and taxes, right? We know it. We've been taught this. We know it. There's jokes about it. But the reality is nobody plans for it.
That's right.
You know what's going to happen and you're not planning for it. It's ludicrous. You'll plan your you'll spend more time planning your vacation than you will be planning for the event of your death, which leaves everyone destitute.
Yep.
And the tax bill that comes at that time. You know, in Canada, the day that you leave planet Earth, every single thing that you own is considered sold on that day. Which means if you've got a 401k or you've got a Roth or you've got any of these other like products in Canada, RSPs and stuff, they're considered sold on that day at the market value. Now, 6 months later, someone, not you, because you're gone, has to file the final tax return. And did you know that the Canadian government or the IRS, Uncle Sam, they won't accept shingles and doors and drywall and cars and rental houses and your stock portfolio? They're only going to accept the currency of the country. Got it? Which means everything that you own has to be turned into currency. That's what's called liquidation. You spend a lifetime building it up and it all gets crashing down on the day that you kick the bucket because you did poor planning. It's ridiculous, by the way. And so for most people, that becomes the biggest tax bill they'll ever pay. But it doesn't need to be that way. It's easy to solve that problem. All you need to do is change your thinking, because it's all about how you think.
Mindset, brother. Way to end it there. That's beautiful. And in terms of for you, I know you have a new thing in your life that you're excited to talk about that's just come out here recently. If you want to just touch on that real quick, where can people find it? Where can people find you?
Yeah, great. So we just released our first book in a series. It's Canadian's Guide to Wealth Building Without Risk. It's the process of becoming your own banker. It's a short read. It's good for a short flight. It's available on Amazon to purchase there. Again, you can learn more about the process by going to 7steps.ca. There's a great free report there. It walks you through a learning journey, very simple. I think people, if they want to learn a little bit about Nelson, I mean, everything I do, it just comes from Nelson. I really think people should watch there's a 60-minute documentary film that I was involved with making on his life. I think it's very inspiring. So even if you just want to be inspired, you can go to Nelson Nash Film. That's nelsonnashfilm.com to learn about that. And of course, if you had fun with this, we have a podcast called Wealth Without Bay Street, and we have a lot of fun talking about this and other subjects and interviewing a lot of like entrepreneurs and things about people and their journey and also like how they define success. So it's fun to have these conversations, and it's all about learning and growing together. So thank you for what you do, Jesse. I appreciate it. I appreciate your show. I appreciate how you're showing people that they can operate their life on their own terms, and they can learn more about themselves and they can learn more about the world by listening to programs like yours.
I love it, brother. I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you for being you. Thank you for giving us your knowledge, your insight, your experience, giving us some of your passion and some of the things that you are, helping yourself, your family, and your clients with every day. And one last question I'd be remiss to not ask with your podcast, Wealth Without Bay Street. Is Bay Street Canada's Wall Street?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we have some friends of ours that also teach this concept, and they have a podcast called Wealth Without Wall Street. Great guys,
Beautiful.
Russ and Joey. And we just asked them, hey guys, do you mind if we piggyback on that? And they said no problem. So yeah, Bay Street's the Canadian equivalent of Wall Street. You got it.
Understood, brother. Let me be the first listener and guest to say thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing more of what you're doing in the world, seeing the impact you're making, because I know it's a huge one. Thank you so much for being on the show, brother.
Thanks, Jesse.